In this movie, I'll show you how to set things up under Windows 7 and earlier so that you can double-click on an image file at the desktop level and have it open inside Photoshop. In the next movie, I'll show you how to do the very same thing under Windows 8, and then in the third movie, I'll show you how to do the same thing on the Mac. If you have access to my exercise files folder, you'll find a subfolder inside it called O1 Open Image that contains a total of 4 image files, all of which appear to be called welcome. They're really called welcome.jpg, welcome.ping, welcome.psd, and welcome.tiff. Together, JPEG, PNG, the native Photoshop document format, and TIFF represent the 4 most essential imaging formats. I'll explain why later. But for now, I want you to be able to see those extensions because you'll have a lot easier time working inside Photoshop if you know what kind of file you're working with. And to do that, you tap the Alt key in order to bring up the old style menu bar. And then you click on Tools and you choose Folder Options. Inside the Folder Options dialog box, go ahead and click on the View tab. And then notice this checkbox down here, Hide Extensions for Known File Types. Go ahead and turn that checkbox off, and then click OK in order to bring up those extensions like so. Now obviously, you open an image file, just like any other file on Windows, by double-clicking on it. But that does not necessarily ensure that the file will open inside Photoshop. And it really depends on your system-level settings. So in my case, if I double-click on welcome.tiff, it opens in Photoshop just fine, as you can see here. And I know I'm in Photoshop because I can see a bunch of panels over here on the right-hand side of the screen. I've got a toolbox over here on the left side of the screen, and the image is surrounded by a dark gray interface. But that's not necessarily going to be the case. I'll go ahead and minimize Photoshop so that I can return to the folder of images. And I'll double-click on welcome.jpg, which on this system happens to open the image inside the Windows Photo Viewer, which obviously isn't going to do me any good, because if I don't have the file open inside Photoshop, I can't use Photoshop to edit the image. To solve this problem, go ahead and close the program that you don't want to use. Right-click on the image file, go down to Open With, and select this very last command, Choose Default Program. Then, inside the Open With dialog box, you want to go ahead and select Photoshop. Now, you should see it in this top list here, but if you don't, then you can click on Other Programs to view a list of still more programs that can open this JPEG file. And if you still can't find Photoshop, you'll have to click on the Browse button and locate the Photoshop application on your hard drive. Once you've selected Photoshop, make sure this checkbox, Always Use the Selected Program to Open This Kind of File, is turned on, and then click OK, and the file will once again open inside Photoshop. Here's another way to work. I'll go ahead and minimize Photoshop again. Notice if I click on welcome.ping, I don't even have to double-click on the file. In order to see what program it's going to open in, I can just take a look at this little icon there. That's showing me, by default, it's going to open inside Fireworks. I would prefer to work inside Photoshop, so I'm going to right-click on that image file, choose Open With, and once again, select this final command. And then I'll go ahead and select Photoshop from the list, and click OK in order to open the file. And from now on, PNG files will open inside Photoshop. Just one more file that we need to test, and that's the native PSD document. I'll go ahead and minimize Photoshop and double-click on that file. Now, chances are very good that the file will open inside of Photoshop, but chances are equally good that you'll get this missing fonts warning that's telling you that you're missing one or more fonts inside this document, and your list may appear longer than mine. Now, in any other program, this is a big problem because it means all these fonts will need to be substituted with different fonts that are available on your system. But in Photoshop, all you have to do is click on the Don't Resolve button, and Photoshop will go ahead and open that file. And notice if I go over here to the Layers panel and I scroll up the list, I can see all kinds of text layers indicated by these little T's with yellow caution icons next to them, which tells me that I'm missing the font for that particular text layer. I'll go ahead and select the Photoshop text layer, and then I'll switch over to my Type tool, about midway down inside the toolbox. And notice up here in the options bar, I used a font called Burka in order to set this text. And Burka is not installed on this machine. And yet, the word Photoshop looks great, not only at the current view size, but even if I press Control plus to zoom in to the 100% view size, which I can see is at work up here in the Title tab, the text looks fantastic. And that's because Photoshop goes ahead and saves a pixel version of the text along with every file. The only downside is I can't edit this text unless I want to switch it to a different font or install Burka on my system. But I can still go ahead and print it, and it will look as good as it does on screen. And that, friends, is how you set things up so you can open a JPEG file, PNG, PSD, or TIFF file directly inside Photoshop just by double-clicking on it at the Windows desktop.